Morning, everybody. This is Mike for the mic drop, and as you can already tell, I'm kind of in the emotional side of things. As you know, that's me. If you know me, um, today's this segment is going to be extremely hard for me to do, um, and it's just because I think it's because of how much it means to me and how much it has meant to me in the past. So I'm going to ask you guys to bear with me for this episode of Mike's Drops, because today we are going to talk about Mr. Andrew Wood, the principal at Northridge High School, at Middlebury Entitlement Schools. And the reason that I am emotional already is because I knew that I would have to do this at some point if I was going to stay true to the mission. Then um, all truth is important, all of it, and some of it is very, very hurtful. Um, Maybe not intended to be so, but it just is. So, today's episode, we're going to be talking about my truth and my experience working with Mr. Andrew Wood. A little context between he and I. We came from the same place. We've worked together. For as long as I've been licensed as a school counselor, I have worked with Drew Wood, with the exception of the last year and a half. And they say that betrayal hurts most when it's someone you trust the most and someone you really, really, really care about. Yeah. A lot of people know after working with me for the years that I did at Northridge how much I really loved Drew Wood as a man, as a mentor, as a spiritual leader. The guy looked up to him so much. And I believed in him. I believed in his mission. I believed in what it is that he wanted to do with education, because at first I believe it was pure. I believe his intentions were good. I believe that what he had intended to do with his career in education was a positive thing. But that didn't last. He and I worked for 2 years together at Fort Wayne Snyder in Indiana, where he was the number 2 principal in charge of the building, and I was one of the new counselors. That's how we started working together. And I'm not lying when I tell you that my 2 years that I worked at Snyder High School was almost as hostile as working at Middlebury Community Schools towards the end, because politics. The area superintendent, the principal, and the guidance director all had different ideas on who they wanted to hire for the position that I eventually got that year, and it led to a couple of years of a hostile work environment. Shocker, right? But that's how I met Mr. Wood. And when he interviewed for the principal job at Northridge High School, and he got it, he reached out to me because he knew that I was not thriving well at Snyder. And he said, he goes, there's a position for a school counselor at the place I'm going to. It's just a sabbatical. If you're interested, I could have the link sent to you and you could audition. Now, it's no special treatment or anything. You just have to audition like everybody else. And I'm like, dude, I'll take anything. Let's go. And during the 2 years that I was at Fort Wayne Snyder, here's the depth that Mr. Wood and I's relationship developed. He was the only man in the building that I could actually talk to. Like, Mr. Wood was my Malahan at Fort Wayne Snyder, because I didn't have anybody else. All of my family and support group and friends and everything that I known to be constant in my life was actually down towards Indianapolis, where my family was, my 2 younger brothers. So there are many times I found myself at the end of work days in Mr. Wood's office talking about life and God and things that just seemed unfair, and politics of the school systems and the game, and all the stuff that we have to face as educators that doesn't have anything to do with your kids, that we should never ever actually have to deal with or prioritize, but apparently it is what it is. So nights after nights for a couple of years, he and I would be talking sharing personal stuff. He was giving me advice. He was giving me guidance, trying to help lead me through a dark time, and he did. Like I'm gonna throw. That's why this is really so fucking hard. I'm sorry, I censored. This is why it's so hard. I believe that this man saved my life too when I was out in Snyder. Because it was just not that I was that bad at that point, but professionally that was my first job, and it was hostile. It hurt, for reasons that I didn't invite. It was just because I was different, which, shocker. I know that's a common theme here in the mic drops. So anyway, that's the history of me and Mr. Wood at Snyder High School and coming out to Northridge. And when we started at Northridge, I followed Drew's leadership for one very important reason. He had a motto that was not questionable. At least it wasn't until the last 3 years or so that I worked with him. And it was, we may not know, we may not have all the answers to everything that's going to come our way, but at the end of the day, if you're doing what's best for kids, I'll support you. That's what Mr. Wood used to live by, and I believed him. And for a lot of the years that I was at Northridge, I think a lot of people saw Mr. Wood and I as really close, and we were friends. We were really close friends. I would say he was the person that I probably felt closest with at the beginning of my time coming out to Northridge High School. So, the title of this segment is aptly named, one, because I'm hilarious and I like laughing, and the other is because it's extremely appropriate for what I'm going through. Like, I am in mourning over losing Mr. Wood in my life after having him for over a decade as a close friend, as a mentor, as a leader. It's so hard when you feel like someone's actually there to defend you and you trust in them so much, and then you find out underhandedly they've been part of the problem the whole time and just been covering up their involvement so that you'll continue to believe in them. If I had to say a single sentence out there that was true of Mr. Wood from my experience on Mike Truth, it's the fact that he cares more about his image than he does now about the children that he is in charge of at that building, which is sad, because that's how our former principal used to be at Snyder. And he used to tell me things like, if she doesn't like working with children, I don't really understand why she's in education. Yeah, Drew, I don't know why it suddenly becomes so important to do very, very specific types of programs and ignore a bunch of others. But I'm not a principal, so I'm not going to throw that out there yet. This is just about me for now. And this segment will probably have quite a few follow-ups. Because after 10 years with someone that you considered to be almost family, a betrayal like this cannot be discussed in one single video. And I'm not the only one that's been betrayed by Mr. Andrew Wood in many different ways, both professionally and personally, over the 10 years that I've known him. And I want you guys to know a couple things, okay? Some people don't know the events that transpired, which is why this is, a mic's drop. This is a drop of wisdom in what led up to the advent of the mic drop, live stream. And this one was, it's so hard to do. There's just so much. I knew that I could no longer trust Drew Wood to do what's best for kids about 5 years into me working at Northridge. Maybe it was a little bit young. Maybe it was like 3 or 4. It's felt like the middle of my time there, and there's a scenario that had happened, and this is a true scenario. If you don't believe me, go and ask Mr. Wood in his face. Now, he's a consummate politician and knows how to lie better than anybody I've ever met, but you're intelligent people. Go ask him and see what his reaction is, and then make your own conclusions, okay? I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm telling you this is Mike's truth. Mr. Wood has other tactics that I will talk about towards the end of this first episode. But for now, we're going to focus on our relationship. Couple of things that you should know. One, Mr. Wood's. It was Mr. Wood's idea to make me the pep band director of the high school in lieu of an actual pep band director, and it was a brilliant move on his part politically for the school systems, but it was also a very, very good move on his part to actually get the right person with the right kids doing that particular job. I wouldn't have had an opportunity to become as involved in Middlebury Community Schools without some of the direction that he's given me. So you can't. There's no way that 100% that somebody is all bad, and there's no way that someone is all good, because we're all human. We're all allowed to err and make mistakes and grow and apologize. The difference between what's going on with us and what's going on at Middlebury Entitlement Schools is they don't believe in accountability. They don't believe they have to apologize. They don't believe they have to own up to anything, and they're actually scared to own up to any possible accusation whatsoever, because not only is it true, but it could lead to some very, very bad things to happen to the administration of the school, which is what happens when the truth is revealed about who you are as a person. And now we're going to get a little more direct. Here's some things that you don't know that you should. When I heard about what had happened to John Homan at the middle school, the very first thing that I did was I texted Mr. Wood. And I asked him, is there any truth to the story that I'm hearing out of the middle school where a staff member killed himself in the parking lot of the middle school after, by his own admission, being bullied into submission by administrators, a fellow counselor, and some other people that he named? You can understand why this would resonate with me after what you've already heard in the mic drop about the corruption and the way that I'm being treated. So keep that with a grain of salt. He didn't respond back to me other than we should talk soon. So I said, hey, it's great. Spring break's coming up. I'll give you a call. We can talk about this. I haven't talked to you in a minute. Maybe we could discuss this. He never called me. We never discussed it, despite me reaching out to him multiple times. And then came the day of the school board meeting. And from what I had heard at that point, the way that John Homan's situation, what happened, the school system itself was trying to put its own spin on it that was not true to John Homan's truth. Now, if you can tell, the whole purpose of this is to go out and abolish false truths and instead place real truths and then ask those questions. What's the difference between a false and a real truth, Malahan? Why are you the one that can be able to say that? Here's the only difference between a false and a real truth. If what you're coming out of your mouth is true about how you feel, then it's true. If it's a lie to manipulate other people into feeling a certain way, then that's false. And for those of you who have known Mr. Wood, you're going to have a really, really, really hard time knowing when he's being genuine and when he isn't. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I had the longest stint of wool pulled over my eyes for this man. When I didn't get a response from him, I decided that I was going to come and speak to the school board meeting on April just to share my experience in, context with what happened with John Homan. Mr. Wood got a hold of this knowledge because I usually will show up to visit the children whenever I'm in town. Anytime I've not been working at a given time, if I've been out or something along those lines, and I have the ability to visit the children, then I will. And normally what will happen is an old teacher or an old administrator or an old principal will show up during lunch duty. A bunch of kids will get really, really excited because they haven't seen them in a while. It's during lunch. There's no breakdown on instructional time. The kids, if they want to talk to you, are willingly, eating their lunch and then coming up and saying hi to you if they want to. It's always been a positive experience. For some reason, though, this day when I showed up, to say hi to the kids. Everything was going along fine. I sat in the front office. I sat next to Janelle Walther, who's getting ready to check in the kids, that are coming in from half days or leaving for half days. And I was just sitting and talking with Tina and Patty Miller was up there, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm here actually speaking to the school board tonight, but I wanted to just stop in and say hi to the kids like I normally do." And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's great." And so it had gone through the process of, I'd gotten a pass printed off to go down to the cafe and talk to the principals that were down there, and that's where I was going to stay. And it's always been a positive thing. And I was leaving the front office to head down to lunch duty. Patty Miller comes and yells at me and says, Mike, we need you to come back. Mr. Wood wants to talk with you." To which I replied, "I bet he does. Because I've been trying to reach out to him for the last month, and he's been dodging me. So sure, let's go back and talk to him." Now, you're just going to have to trust me when I tell you this, because he's going to have a completely different story, and I'm going to let you guys decide if this is Mike's truth, not the facts. So you guys come up with your own conclusions. When I showed up to speak at the school board that meeting that night, I wasn't really fired up. I wasn't really super confident. I was scared. You could tell that from the video of me going and speaking in front of the school board, and if you don't have it, I do, and I can find a way to get it to you. But it was quiet, it was mournful, it was fearful, and it was genuinely about, if this is going on in our schools, we need to do a better job of taking this seriously, and that's all I'm asking you to do, school board, is to take this seriously. That's all I said, and I sat down. Mr. Wood pulled me into his office on the day that I was supposed to go into the school board meeting. And I'm going to tell you something I believe. And you can believe it or not. That's completely fine. It's my truth. I believe that Mr. Wood lured me into his office knowing full well how I felt about the situation, and brought me into his office to try to manipulate, gaslight, and handle me in the same ways that he had done that had led to such a bad experience working for him that I was at a really, really dark place. And after having not been under his thumb and political mindscapes and games for a year and a half, when I sat down across from him and he started to try to heap that same BS on top of me, I wasn't having it. And I straight up called him out, in the midst of these conversations, and we're going back and forth. And the reason why, this was funny, while I was discussing things peacefully with Mr. Wood, he calls the cops on me in the office and says, "Yeah, we're going to need to come over here because Malahan has gotten a little fired up about the John Homan situation." True statements, words from his own mouth. He had me escorted back to the police portion of Northridge High School to give my statement. And while I was there, he was working to try to get me not only removed from the high school, but banned from the high school as a result of the trespass that has been placed upon me, coming from that man in particular. When I was talking with him, he did everything in his power to push my buttons and trigger and fire me up, so that he had justification to feel fearful or something, I don't know, and then have that justification on there. Only I didn't play his game this time, and I think it really upset him. Because I was met by Patty Miller at the entrance and told that it was probably time for me to leave. And I looked at her dead in the eye and I said, "Patty, you can go back and tell your principal that an investigator for the Middlebury Community Schools Police Department, who just took my statement for the last hour, has told me directly to my face he believes I am no danger to children. If he would like to discuss it further, he can come up here and meet me where I will be standing safely with children." Patty doesn't like when you tell her no, and she never has. And I've loved Patty for a while until I found out the truth of Patty Miller. And she's Middlebury to her core. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't need to say anything else. I'm going to let people draw their own conclusions about that, because I'm not the only one that has stories about that. But this is about Mr. Wood. after the school board meeting, the next day I sent an email to Mr. Wood. And you know what? I'll bring you in on this one because I've got nothing to hide. I really don't. And these weren't any type of emails that were exchanged between he and I in confidence. They were just emails. So here's what I told him. I said, Mr. Wood, you broke my heart yesterday. I just wanted to say hello to a few of my kiddos and go into the board meeting, and instead you pulled me into your office, attempted to handle me in the same ways that led to my trauma while I worked for you. You called the cops in and then told to me to my face you didn't think it was a good idea for me to be around the students. You, who used to say it's impossible for Mike Mollahan to ever harm a child. You who used to say that he'd rather die instead of considering even possibly harming someone in general. I don't know when you stopped caring to know me and decided to politic me instead, but I've never been more disappointed in you in my life than when you made that particular judgment call. It's what happens when you make a knee-jerk judgment call because you're afraid of someone saying something, and so you don't have any proof to ban them or stop them from talking, so you have to make something up or try to get them to do something so you can control them because you've lost control over them. I digress. I go on to say when I was finished being interviewed by Middlebury Community Schools Police Department, I asked them if they felt I was a danger to children here, and I was told absolutely not. Yet you, my mentor and friend, the one who's supposed to know me better than anyone else professionally, thought differently. I take it after yesterday, I'm no longer allowed to visit the high school since Patty met me in the front office to encourage me to leave after the interview. So I'm not sure how to talk with you now since the school is out and you don't really care to return my texts. Contrary to how you may have felt yesterday when I was in his office and we were having a verbal altercation, according to him, I'm open to dialoguing about this, but I've done everything I'm going to do to reach out to you, so if you want to try and mend this, you have my number. It hasn't changed in the decade we've known each other, and if I'm still not a priority in your life, which everyone I call a friend is, and you don't respond, I'll know what that means. He did respond very quickly and very politically. In my opinion, here's what it was said. Mike, I genuinely wish you well and hope you get to a better place soon. I'm not sure what else to say right now, but I do think it's best if you do not visit Northridge for now. Be well. When Mr. Wood says, I'm not exactly sure what else to say right now, it means I have not figured out what to say in my mind where I cannot politically be held accountable for the words that I actually want to say. Mr. Wood is one of the most consummate politicians I've ever met in my entire life. And when I once believed in him, I didn't see it. And when I stopped believing in him, I felt slimy, used, manipulated, discarded. They say don't meet your heroes. So I finally responded with this. This was back in April, and that's the last interaction that Mr. Wood and I have actually had. So if Mr. Wood is telling you guys that he and I are friends, and I'm like off the deep end, and he doesn't know what's going on with me, and he wants to say his own little spin on what he feels, he's entitled to. It's his truth. But he's not my friend, and he does not speak for me, and he does not know me because I've been reaching out to him for a month over, and he won't talk to me anymore. So we're not friends. He doesn't know me. He's chosen to only know me in a way that serves his political purposes and promote that view only. And I told him that in my response email. I said, Drew, thank you for the response. It definitely clears up any lingering thoughts about who you are now. And I'll take your advice on the matter into consideration. I genuinely wish you were still the Christ-centered man I grew up to love and respect instead of the political cover-your-butt leader that you've become. I now have to mourn another loss on top of everything else that I was working through. Thanks for that, by the way. And since this is most likely the last time we'll be speaking, please disregard the request for a letter of recommendation. Now that your thoughts on who I am have become so clear, I'll no longer be needing it. And the last thing I sent to Mr. Wood in that email was, please be better, Drew. Staff are killing themselves over the same thing you allowed to have happen to me in your building the past few years, and now is not a time to be choking on pride. That was the last conversation that was actually somewhat asynchronous with Mr. Wood. I've texted him 3 or 4 times since then. I've texted him some very positive messages since then. I haven't heard a thing because he's scared of me. He's scared of my truth. And when someone in power is scared of something they can't control, they will try to discredit it. They will try to slam its name and drag it through the mud. They will try to make it so everybody that once believed in that person no longer believes in that person, so they're no longer a threat. And welcome to today. Pretty sure before April I was not a threat to Middlebury Community Schools, and now within, I don't know, a handful of weeks, couple of months, I am on full trespass, arrest on site, with no one giving any answers as to why. And the school board, when asked why, feels they are so entitled to not have to answer it that they get to call me names from their pulpit. Like disgruntled. They get to assign monikers to me that I didn't invite. And you know what? Fine. Okay. I guess that's a fair way to play. I mean, I can say this. You seem disgruntled, school board. You seem unintelligent in the way that you're handling these things, clearly by the way that your community has an outcry about this. You seem like you know what you're doing, but at the end of the day, you're not. Like, because you're not actually doing anything that your community really is okay with. Or else they would stop asking questions. And you'd have to stop saying things at the beginning of the school board meeting like, we're not going to make any comments on that because reasons. I object. You can't. We're in Middlebury, and this is our place, and you have 3 minutes, and if you want to keep talking, we'll interrupt you, Dr. Jason Snyder, and make you feel insignificant until your 3 minutes are up, and then you can leave. And then we don't have to see you for another 2 weeks. Hopefully, by then, everybody will forget. Oh, and we'll keep the board meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that no parents can show up ever. Observations. I have a feeling that my Mike's drops on Mr. Wood is not going to be, they're not going to be isolated to one video. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one as it is now because it was kind of an overview of where we were at and where we ended up. And there will be plenty more because I have 10 years of personal stories at the expense of Mr. Wood's political machinations that I can't wait to share. Because it's my truth. And I was silenced from sharing it before because it made him look not as well as he wanted to. Well, no more. Welcome to the mic drop era. Mr. Wood, it's time for accountability. I have now called out every single member of the school board. I have called out the superintendent. I have called out the assistant superintendent. And now I'm calling out the high school principal. And I'm not the only one. So, thank you for listening. I'm glad I was able to get through the emotional part of it pretty early and get to the informational part because I was a little bit worried about how this one was going to go. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for sharing my truth and listening. Again, I don't have any marching orders for you guys to go and do anything with. I've never actually asked anything about that, but to utilize your own brains, your own minds, your own hearts, your own discernment, and actually make decisions for yourself on what you see and what you feel. Mr. Wood and I are on opposite ends of that policy now, where he wants to control how everything is seen and how everything is felt. And I want to bring to light everything that is not able to be talked about that is felt, and not that is able to be talked about that is seen. So he and I are probably going to be adversaries. I don't consider the man my enemy. I don't consider the man my foe. I don't have any evil intention towards him whatsoever. I completely disagree with the way that his political machinations are getting in the way of loving on children unconditionally. And I will stand against that for as long as I breathe. If you have more questions about that, you know how to reach me. Everybody's hit me up on Facebook. Please continue to do so. And this has been Mike Mullihan, host of the Mic Drop, doing a Mike's Drop on Principal Andrew Wood of Middlebury Entitlement Schools. If you have watched this video and you have tons of stories with him that you'd like to share, hit me up. This one will not be stopping anytime soon. I love you guys so much. I just do. And I'm so thankful that you just took the time to listen to someone else's truth other than the one that continually is to get shoved down your throat from the school system that you work at. You matter. You're intelligent. I love you. Think. Be critical. Don't obey if it's not rational, if it just doesn't make sense. Ask questions. It's okay to do that. We live in a democracy. We're supposed to be able to have freedom of speech and ask questions. Exercise it. I am. This is Mike on the Mic Drop. Love you guys. We out.